What's going on, PGM fam? Welcome back to another episode with the Power of a Growth Mindset. First, want to kick things off by saying Happy New Year. We are officially in 2024. We are really excited to get things started back over here with our group here. And so today we are joined with our first guest of the year, Mr. Chad Colvin. He is a senior technical specialist for product marketing over at Data IQ. He is a graduate of both UNC Chapel Hill and NC State. He's got a degree in mathematics as well as a master's degree in advanced analytics. But the beauty in what his story that we will be diving into today, he's got a passion for responsible AI and how data is shaping the world and society around us. He recently started a blog called Numbers on the Board, and he also has a big love for both music, college basketball, and of course, diversity in tech. Chad, welcome to the show, man. We're happy to have you with us today.
Hey Josh, thank you so much, man. That was an intro right there. I don't think I've ever gotten one of those. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man. Well, we're happy to have you with us here. First off, Happy New Year to you, man. How were the holidays?
Yeah, happy New Year. The holidays were amazing. So for me, the holidays are nice because I don't have to travel anywhere. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. So my parents live about 15 minutes away. My brother lives 20 minutes away. So it's just a nice little drive to my mom's house, eat some good food, go back home, sleep. I got a lot of I definitely feel for the people that have to travel and get on those flights. But the holidays were great, always just hanging with family, eating. The New Year's is always fun, always trying to find time to reflect on the past year and how it can be improved, but also what can I take with me from the past year to the new year. So it was a really good experience this new year.
That's awesome, man. And I love how you kind of started off with us because I know Mike and I we did this as we were wrapping up the year is taking that step back to reflect. We always believe that's important to take that time and set those new goals, especially as you go into this new year. So I'm glad that you were able to take that time, but most importantly, take some space to just enjoy being around the fam because I know that's both important to Mike and I know for the folks that are in the audience, I know folks who actively travel and are also on the road and making sure that they're getting that as well. So happy that you enjoyed the holidays, man. But I do want to start things off. As you know, we love to kick off the episode with the mental health check-in. And so, you kind of already hinted a little bit of you're starting the new year off. Things are off to a good start. But we want to ask you, how are you doing mentally? How are you doing physically? And really, as you start thinking about this new year, we'll want to throw something in there. But like, what's exciting you about going into 2024?
Man, that's a really good question. So I think just to start with the first part of it, like I think in terms of a mental health check-in, things are well. I think I've definitely found a groove this year where I feel like in my career I feel like I'm solidified. I know what I need to do to continue to improve. So that feels nice. I feel like I have support there from family and friends. I feel like I kind of, know my routines now, like know how much to check in on my family and check in on my friends and be there for when they need me. And then I think for myself too, I think I'm taking a lot more time to be kind of selfish with my time a little bit, to really make sure I'm not being burnt out. Um, like even for January, I feel like it's only been 2 weeks in, but time has been moving so fast because just the course of business and life and stuff like that. And so today this is my first time ever doing this, but I've been fasting all day. So I've been drinking nothing but like water and tea and trying to really make that make me like slow down, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
Like just coming to a point of like, all right, what can be better than like separating a need, right? And understanding that that need is not actually what you need, right? It's more like what you want, and focusing on the things that matter and just slowing down that way. So I've been doing that today. It's been really helpful. Um, and yeah, so I'm doing well in terms of the mental health. And then for this year, I'm just excited to travel. Like I'm
Mhm.
doing a lot of traveling this year. I got a vacation coming up. So, Josh, if you need to call me, text me anytime in the next 2 weeks, don't please, because I ain't gonna respond. um, but I'm going to like the Bahamas and stuff like that, and then next month we got some travel for work, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, just want to keep traveling this
That's
year.
that's awesome, man. Mike, what's the saying, man? What's PTO stand for?
Hey, prepare the others, man. That's not my
you got
problem.
you got to let them know. You got
Hey,
to let them
when I
know.
submit that request, that's not me asking for permission. That's me being respectful of the policy and letting you know that I will not be present whether you approve or deny the request that was submitted. Absolutely. I
Oh
feel that.
man. Oh
I like that.
man. Yeah, man. Well, happy that you're getting some travel in, and it sounds like the year is off to a good start. But speaking off to a good start, want to make a little bit of a transition because I know that you have recently released a new blog, We Are All Numbers. And you kind of shared a little bit about your experience around how you had an early connection with math in the first grade. You talk about how you had some negative experiences surrounding the world of math. But I want to start our question and conversation today around if you could dive a little bit about how this early love for math influenced your decision to pursue the career that you're in right now.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think the career that I'm in now is like it's it definitely has math components and math foundations to it, but it's very far from like what I learned in college. So um, really, I would say my relationship with math started less so even in the first grade and more so just like watching sports. Like my dad was a huge baseball fan. So my dad grew up like around in the 70s when the Yankees were popping. And he became a really big baseball fan and kind of gave that to me. He's like, hey, we're watching baseball. I don't care what you think. So we would be watching baseball together, and they would have the stats up on the board, and I would just kind of be looking at them like, oh, what does batting average mean? What does this dude's batting 287? What does that mean? Right. And then my dad would kind of break it down. And then I remember when I got into first grade, that story from the blog, that's always stuck with me, where um we were playing this game, right? We're playing this like kind of numbers game where one person has a calculator, the other person has to use mental math. And I remember going up, and there was like this long equation, at least what I thought was long when I was 7 years old. It was like 3 or 4 numbers that we had to add and subtract. And um, the person with the calculator, that I was just doing mental math, and the person with the calculator was typing stuff in, and I'm just kind of looking at the numbers and not even adding or subtracting anything, but just thinking like, what might this be? And I think I say like 12. And then my teacher's like, oh yes, that's it. Wow. And I remember my teacher's face being like, oh wow, look at Chad getting this. And it put so much like pride into my heart. And really, I would say that stuck with me all the way through school, especially when I got to middle school and got to high school and started to understand the world a little bit more, and how, it's a stereotype that, it's like Black people can't do math, quote unquote. And that always stuck with me. And I've always been a kid that's like, nah, I don't like the status quo. I'm gonna fight back against that. So when I started to hear that, I'm like, man, who can't do math? Like I'll even major in math just to show people that I can do math.
Oh, wow.
Um, so I feel like a lot of that kind of like led my path to I'm gonna start doing math, and really, and I didn't talk about this in the blog, but by the time I hit college, I realized, oh, this is not what I want to do, but I'm happy that I have the skill to do it. And that skill and that foundation led me eventually to analytics, and then led me to data IQ. And now I'm in a role where having that foundation is really good, and really gives me a leg up on the competition and gives me a new way to think about things. But I get to still use the my God-given gift of like speaking and interacting with people, and So I would really say that's how that path happened from math to where I am now.
Mm.
I wanna dive a little deeper into that because we see kind of, and I had an experience growing up where you don't see a lot of Black students pursuing areas of STEM. And you've seen a lot of over the last few years, you see a lot more programs and things that have been stood up to make sure that we're creating a pathway to ensure that we're creating some form of pipeline to increase exposure to these areas. But I want to know, as you were kind of going throughout your story, I know you mentioned in that moment, like, hey, you had a teacher that recognized, like, yeah, you got the answer, and that filled you up. But I wonder, as you continue to progress, even after that moment, what drew you more into wanting to pursue a little bit more in the STEM field?
Mhm.
Like, I know you had mentioned that, you know, you had sat down and you saw like the numbers from what your dad was growing up, but like, what kept you in it? Because I think all too often,
Mhm.
as we think about folks who do pursue these paths, you know, you have a one class that's just like a weed out process in college, and then that changes your whole trajectory. Or maybe you take a class in high school, or you have a teacher that, you know, persuades you to go another direction because it's quote unquote too hard for you. And I had an experience like that. So I
Mhm.
wonder what that was like for you as you were kind of growing up and navigating your own path.
Yeah, that's really good. So I think for me, like what kept me through it ultimately was, um, I think I want to say sixth grade was my first. That was the first year where we had split classes, right? Where you would, go from class to class, English to math to science and stuff like that. And that year, my first math teacher was a Black woman,
Mhm.
and she was always so supportive, right? Like always so like, hey, you can do this. Like, I know it seems hard, but you can do it. And then like from there, I had never had any other Black teachers in middle school or high school until I got to senior year in honors calculus. My teacher was a Black man, and he also kind of was saying the same things that my sixth grade teacher would say of like, hey, it's tough, but like you can do it. Like I did it. I know many people that look like both of us that did it. You can do it. And that always stuck with me for some reason. Um, Especially knowing that I had no other Black teachers but these two different math teachers that I had while I was growing up. And it made me realize just how like rare that was, especially speaking to people once I got to college. People were like, oh man, that's crazy. I never had any other teachers, math teachers than just white males. And it made me realize how rare that was, and how like if I want to see, this world, especially STEM, be, become more diversified in the future, I have a part to play in that. And that's kind of what kept me in it. Like I remember being at Carolina being like, man, I want to desperately change my major. But for some odd reason, I just felt like I have a bigger responsibility to uphold by getting through this.
Mm.
So even if I don't do anything in math after this, I want somebody, a Black or brown student who's at Carolina to see my face in like the little alumni picture in the math hall and think, oh man, if he could do it, I could do it. Um, so that's what kept me in, because I desperately wanted to quit a couple times. You can ask some of my friends. I was asking them about their majors, like, hey man, what's this econ? Nah, I don't know. That sounds too close to math. I'm like, what you doing? Psychology? I think I could do that.
Man, I'm like you. I'm like, I could stay with the numbers, but I had that one science class. You know, my parents were like, "Hey, we could see you being a doctor at some point." And I had that one biology class my freshman year, and I was like, "Nah, I'm good, y'all."
Yeah, yeah. My dad wanted me to work in NASA. He was like, man, I can
Okay.
see you at NASA. I was just like, I don't think so.
Hey, hey, Chad, you highlighted a few good points that I would like to talk about. Uh, having been an educator, well, I'm an educator currently, and oftentimes I see many Black boys who oftentimes, and I can speak on this because I'm not going to identify that the ethnicity of, well, any identifying information of the student, but there's a student that I know that was placed in advanced classes, and there was people there to advocate for this particular student, because oftentimes a lot of students who are identified as people of color are oftentimes overlooked because they don't necessarily meet the bullet points that's under the requirements. So I wonder if you can speak to that. You it came natural to you, but for some people, we know that sometimes they may not necessarily meet their standard requirement for being in like advanced placement courses. What are your thoughts on being able to work with students and Black boys of color, and creating programs to bridge that gap? Because while it came natural to you, but for some, they have it, but they just need a little bit of support. And sometimes we say going into the STEM field, sometimes they can't even see past the grade level that they're currently in. So I wonder, what are your perspective, or mindset that is needed to be able to move beyond just that grade level and seeing advancement?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I see it in two ways, right? I think from a student perspective, the way that I would operate was, I don't get this now, but I'm gonna get it at some point. Like, especially once I got into the pre-calcs and the calcs, and then eventually in college, it was, during that first lesson, it's like, man, I don't understand what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but give me a couple more days, give me a couple more weeks to really just sit down with it myself, and I think I can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, finding outside help too. Like, I kind of was the type to not take no for an answer. It's like, I can't, like, I have to figure this out. So I think that's from the student perspective, like, you have to have that, but also that can be influenced by the instructors and by the teachers, that I think really making sure brown and Black children know that it is possible, and that there's much, much more that they can do than just like this, what's on paper in front of them. Um, like, how far they can really go. I remember I taught a it was like a pre-college program at UNC. I believe it was Upward Bound, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of students who were Black, Hispanic, Latino, and it was really a joy to teach them, because some of them came in like, man, I've always been bad at math. And I'm like, all right, well, that's going to stop today. You just saying that you're bad at math, it starts there. Like, I'm not going to let you say that in my classroom. Like, if you don't understand it right now, that's fine. But that's why I'm here. So I would really kind of put a lot of those words and those phrases and that messaging into their head, to really let them understand, hey, you can do this. Like, you can do this. It doesn't matter how long it takes for you to do it, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really found, first of all, just for me as the instructor, I found a lot of joy in that, like, in telling them that they can do more, and then to see the progression happen over that summer. It was really a joy to watch. So I think we just need a lot more patience,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just letting them know, it's like, hey, you can go further than where you think you are right now. So yeah.
Mm. I received that. One thing, I think is important in what you said, and I think this could be applied to anybody in their lifestyle, is that affirmation standpoint. Sometimes all your life you've been told that you will never be this, you may not be able to achieve this because X, Y, Z. But then sometimes reframing the narrative and, changing the narrative in a sense to saying, you know what, I too can achieve this. And, it's going to be hard, kind of like what you said, but it's not going to be easy. And if anything, and how my coach tell me if it was easy, everybody be doing it. But just understanding that
Hmm.
we are in charge of our shaping our lives with what we tell ourselves and how we mold our mindset towards growth, which leads me to, with all that you have going on as it relates to your blog, how do you hope that will be able to inspire the next generation of individuals who are like yourself? While we have a lot of, I work with Upward Bound, there are other educators, there are other individuals who are in the STEM field that could also, who also listen to our platform that may be able to benefit from some of the information that you were sharing. What do you hope to be able to leave whenever, I guess, what do you want your legacy to be as it relates to AI, math, and also giving back to your communities?
Yeah. So that's definitely something that I had thought about before starting the blog
Mm-hmm.
is, what's the point of this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and ultimately, you know, because I work in AI and because I work in data, I see how fast it's moving. And I'm constantly thinking about, like, because it's moving so fast, is that going to create a bigger gap between how these technologies work and how they benefit normal people? And that's, like, I would say the biggest thing that I think about on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately why I started the blog. And I think the legacy that I really want to leave, not only with the blog, but just everything that I do, is, first of all, making technology more accessible to everyday people and marginalized communities, um, and making not only the technology but also the concepts and you know the literacy of data and AI more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
But also for people who are even working in technology to understand, like, hey, this is some real things that we need to be thinking about, right? We need to think about responsibility every day. We need to be thinking about equity every day, because if we're the ones that are dictating the technology and the future that's going to come with it, we need to be thinking about this so that 50 years down the line, we're not like, oh man, this AI is actually really harmful to these 5, 6 different groups. How do we mitigate that? It's like, man, we had a chance when we were at the infancy of it. And right
Mm-hmm.
now we're at the infancy of AI. So that's why we really need to be thinking about these things, before we, go ahead and create this new technology. We need to think about how it's impacting people.
Mm. I
That's
agree with that.
actually, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No,
cut
no,
you off.
no. I was just saying, one thing I took away from that is responsible use. I mean, responsible use, right? Because when I look at access and living in a rural standpoint, technology. Right when we hit COVID, right, everyone was like, let's do this virtual, and then they were like, well, students don't have devices, families don't do this, and once we made that available to them, that's when we saw more situations where students were inappropriately using the device, and no, like we say access, we give them access, but nobody don't really teach them how to be responsible but also mature with the access that is given to them. So I appreciate hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to stay on this for a minute, man, because I know that you're in the space. You kind of already mentioned it. We're in the infancy stages, and I heard not too long ago in a blog or a post somewhere that they were saying, like, this is the biggest thing since the dot-com boom. Like when the internet took off, like, we had all the things that came out and how it has made our lives so much easier when you think about just simply going to Google something or being able to communicate to one another seamlessly. But we now see that this thing is just taking a whole new wave of its own. And so I wonder, as we start thinking about this, and you kind of hinted on it around having a passion for making sure that folks in underserved communities have access to the technology, that Black and Brown folks have access to the information, the resources, and the knowledge to be able to understand this thing in the infancy stages. So I want to ask you, as we are in this infancy standpoint, how important is it when we start thinking about the ethics that there are that this is part of the conversation early on, because I know that there's these large language models that are being developed. We know that there's all these other machine learning algorithms that are being used, but not a lot of people want to talk about the ethics right now. So can you give us a little bit of insight, especially on where you are at, on like what ethics looks like and why it's important to have that in the space?
Yeah. So, man,
Yeah, I know it's a
like,
deep question. There's a lot that comes with this.
yeah, no, that's definitely. I mean, but it's a really important question. That's a really good one. Of just, at the end of the day, the applications that we develop using generative AI, traditional ML, statistics, whatever, it's going to be used in a real world scenario with real people with real consequences. And because of that, wouldn't we want our system or our device or our application to be as helpful to as many people as possible? Like that's the question that I always think of when it comes to like Gen AI and AI in general is how do we make this helpful? Not for a subset of people, but for all people that's using it. And if you just think about it from that standpoint, like ethical considerations have to be taken
Mm-hmm.
because we do that in everything else, right? We do that in legal, we do that in, well, I mean, at least I hope we do it in legal and we do it in education. Um, like as I said it, I was just like, come on, man, it's, but we do it in all these different sort of areas, and technology has to be another one, and we can't just rely on government to start making that,
For real?
different mandates. What's up?
I said, for real? Why not? We got to depend on the
I
government,
mean,
bro.
you know why, but it's audio, so I'll explain. Uh,
Hey man, I'll put a little humor on it.
yeah.
Wow, really? I thought we had
But
to depend
like,
on them, man. I ain't think we had a voice.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, for real, right? Like,
Okay.
it's like democracy just moves, man. I think about what J. Cole said all the time because when I first heard it, I was like, that's a cool little bar. But now the older I get, I'm like,
Oh,
no, he's definitely right. Democracy moves too slow, and like if technology is moving at a breakneck speed, how is government going to keep up with that? So that's why ethics are really important here, and why I continue to say, like, I really want marginalized communities to be a part of this technology boom and this technology growth, is because that makes it much easier to have ethical considerations that include them, right? When they're helping develop the technology, it's easier to think about these communities because they are in the process of developing these applications and these systems. When, people who have no say in what happens next with the technology are not involved, we can't accurately, create a system that's actually going to be good for them. So that not only comes down to like the Gen AI standpoint and like large language models and any sort of generative AI that's going to come after that, but it also is about the like just from the data perspective, right? Like there's so much data, there's so much information on each of us as people that are out there, being sold from company to company, and like that is scary to me. Like me personally, that's scary. And I know if that's scary to me, I have friends and people that I went to high school with that may not know about any of this. And they're just living their life and not understanding that their data is being sent like left and right. And if we could just make that, like I said before, that literacy of where we are in life right now when it comes to data and AI more accessible, I think that would really help people understand, where we are as a society in regards to data and AI. But also then that's the first step of how can we make it more ethical? Because now more people are aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chad,
There's
go ahead,
Go
Gandhi.
ahead, man. No, go
No,
ahead,
no,
man.
because me and Gandhi, we talk about this all the time, man. You said something that kind of stood out to me as it relates to, being literate. And so, again, you and I, we talk about incompetent people all the time. And so I wonder, because there's a difference between a consumer who doesn't know how it impacts them, but it's also a huge difference between someone who is in charge of what is being consumed and how it impacts other people. So I wonder if you can speak on that, because we do have people in positions who are hired to ensure ethics, who are like hired to be over the oversight committee or whatever the case may be, to ensure there is no harm done. I wonder if you can speak to that, because I think not only do the consumer have a duty to ensure that their privacy has been upheld, but also I think the organization itself. But sometimes you have people sitting in positions who don't necessarily know that. And while it may sound, the question may be a little different because I'm not directly in tech, but I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that though.
Yeah, so I don't think I can speak directly to it. I feel like that's a different realm of like the technology circle, but it's definitely true. Um, I think there are not enough people that are thinking about these um, ethical considerations and the responsibility that we have to uphold that are in positions of power. Um, I think there definitely are many. There are a lot, and I think the tide is hopefully changing towards more people thinking about it. But um, ultimately it starts because technology is kind of run by these companies.
Hmm.
Each of these companies, like it's really up to the leaders of these companies to dictate the future that we have. Um, and it definitely requires more leadership in each of these companies to be thinking
Hmm.
about these sort of problems. So yeah, yeah, that's. I wish I could speak more on it, but I just don't have the information for it. But
Yeah, I'll add to that, man, because it's something that, and kind of going back to what you were saying, Mike, like the individuals in charge or the players that be have to be more responsible around, and Chad, you kind of mentioned this as you were talking, where data is being purchased so quickly, data is being sold so quickly between one tech company to another, to another software company or an automotive company, where at some point it's like, okay, like you have all this information on me, or you have all this information on individuals, but like, are you using it to the best of your ability? And I always love to go back to the example of like, and I don't know which bank, or I have to go back and look at the article, but you go run into these scenarios where it's like, okay, maybe you're building a model that is going to decide whether or not you're going to give someone a loan to purchase a home. And if you are constantly feeding that model, that is like, this is the demographic, or this is the only information that is going to be relevant to feeding or training this model, then of course you're going to have some bias towards someone who is going to be able to purchase a home or get a home loan, right? And so it's one of those things where, as you've got the players that be, kind of as you were saying, where it's like the people that we put in place have to be put and held to a higher responsibility, at least the way I look at it,
mhm.
because
Hmm.
we know that the data that is constantly being traded, the data that's constantly feeding these algorithms, we know is going to continue to get better over time. But as we also see, is that whoever's in charge, they also have a responsibility to make sure that the folks who are building these algorithms that are feeding the models aren't creating any bias. And then you
Mm.
also have to ensure, when you go one level deeper, that when you are recreating or not creating or pulling in pipeline or talent, that's what I'm trying to get to. When you're starting to create that talent that's in the room, like, you need to have more people on the bottom line who are also going to make sure that the folks in charge are also going to be held to this higher power. Because if not,
Mhm.
we're going to continue to run into this circle of just like, well, we're back to where we started. And then going back to your original comment of like, we are in the infancy stages. Like, this is now the time where we have to challenge people and be like, this ain't right. Because if we don't challenge it wrong, I'm not saying we're going to end up in like an iRobot situation where robots are going to take over the world, but we are going to be in a situation where we're going to continue to see different areas and people being left behind. Like it's a continuous cycle.
Mm-hmm. And even to double down on that, I think just the fear about that gap becoming wider.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's not just a it's not just a racial thing or like based off somebody's nationality. It's also a socioeconomic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all of the different aspects of somebody's life. But I really think about in socioeconomic standards, right? How they say like the middle class is kind of disappearing and it's becoming like extreme to one end. That's going to get even bigger the faster this technology goes. And so if we don't really think about some of these things right now, um, I could see in 40, 50 years, there's just two classes, right? There's like extreme poverty and then extreme wealth. And that's a very extreme sort of take, but like but that's also like a big fear that could definitely happen.
That's real. So I know we're still on the responsible AI part of this, but I wanna go back to your passion because you had mentioned that this is a passion and a focus area for you. And we know that especially being in kind of like the tech space, you know that there are organizations that are pushing ethical AI. So I kind of want to think about and take a step back when you think about your own organization. How are you or your own organization fostering that, like really a growth mindset to embrace the technology, but also embrace the idea that the ethics around what is going to shape this technology are going to be at the forefront?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say the biggest thing for the the organization that I work with is explainability, as well as ways to easily investigate the responsibility of your models, right? So like stress testing and these different things. But I would say in terms of like the explainability of our models, I think Data IQ makes it extremely easy, or at least what we definitely want customers to understand is we make it extremely easy to understand what your model is doing and what are the driving factors behind its decisions. And I think we sometimes get lost in the world of data of like, I just need an output, just predict something. It's like, no, we need to understand why it predicted that thing, right? So then we can put it under really strenuous testing before it goes live or before it's actually working on real people. So we can understand like what is it doing, you know, maybe there's a certain subpopulation that's not being accounted for correctly. All right, we got to go back to the drawing board and you know, edit some things before we retrain this model. So that's something that I think we do extremely well. And I think, I mean, what I'm saying, I'm a company man, so I feel like we do that better than anybody else. I'll just say it. But I think that that's really important, right? Having models that are explainable, and having models that can easily be tested and prototyped, and um, going back to the drawing board and adding in more people. Like collaboration is a big part of it too, right? We can't just have expert data science making models the whole time. We need to bring in people that understand the data, understand the ethics to help with that model creation. So all those sort of things are really important.
Hmm. So, from your perspective, how do you see AI influencing our future interactions? And also, what is your thought process on that?
Oh man, that's a good one. How is it going to influence our future interactions? I hope not by much, personally. Like I really feel like we should be a human driven society, and I feel as though we're like flirting with the idea of not doing that, right? There's
Mm,
less and less human interaction every day, especially after the pandemic. Um, instead of going into a restaurant to pick up my food and just saying like, hey, how are you? You know what I'm saying? Thank you so much. Here's a tip. I'd rather order on DoorDash and like not have to interact with anybody, right? For example. So I feel like that's just become the norm of like people want to interact with people less. And that's really scary to me. Um, I think what will happen is ultimately, I think generative AI is going to displace a lot of people in terms of like jobs and job security. And that's another reason why I started the blog, because that makes me very scared. And I would like more people to understand that. Um, because the great part about the technology is it can do so many things and it can really help better the world. But Mike, that's where your question about leaders comes in, is we need to understand that this is a tool for people to use. This should not be a replacement of people or a replacement of work. So that's where like the leaders, their responsibility is, do not, cut this person who's just trying to work their job to replace it with this generative AI tool that could be run on an automatic, like scheduled script. That's why I always say like we need to put people first. And in my blog post, and I think on my website, you could see like um, people first, things second. I think I have that quote somewhere in that blog. So it's really important that we think about people before we just go ahead and replace it with some sort of AI tool.
I like that, man. And I always love, and I always tell folks, and at least in all the years that I've been in the analytics and the data space, what I always tell folks is the numbers are important. Don't get me wrong, the numbers are important. The formulas that you use, the code that you create, that's all important. But at the end of the day, if you know your people and you know your organization and you know that human element that the computer cannot output, trust that gut. The numbers are more just a supplemental thing to help you make a decision. But at the end of the day, you as a leader are responsible for understanding the people, the organization that you're in, and how things need to function. And that's that. And that's that. But hey, man, I know we talked on a number of different things. And as we kind of wrap this episode up, I know there's a ton of stuff that we can dive in. I know you've got a lot of stuff that you're going to be unraveling in your blog. But as we do close this up, I want to ask you, what's one thing that you want to leave our audience with today? I know you came in, you talked a lot about responsible AI, you talked a little bit about your story. But as folks are trying to navigate their own journey, right, or their own process, whether it is, hey, I'm trying to get through this math class, or hey, I'm trying to figure out what is the direction that I want to take my career? What is one piece of advice that you could leave folks as you wrap up this episode that will help them as they continue to carry along in their own process?
Yeah, so I think just like a universal piece of advice that really helped me is, I mean, it sounds simple, but man, ask for help. Like, we do not, like, we're always learning, we're continuously learning, we don't know everything, but there is somebody next to you who you may never have talked to in your life that may know the thing that you're trying to know. And nothing is better than just asking for help, collaborating with people. At the end of the day, like, how they say soft skills really takes you far. um like, if you ask for help and you make friends and you learn from them, um have mentors and just continue to grow, um that will really set you apart in every single avenue that you're in. So
That's
I would
awesome.
say that's the last thing. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, first off, we appreciate you coming in and dropping some gems for us and for our audience today. Before we kind of wrap things up, though, how can people get in contact with you? Also, how can people read the blog or follow you on the blog? Because I know that that's something that you're going to be picking up in the new year.
Yeah, so you guys can check out the blog at numbersonthebrd.com. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn as well, Chad Covin, and Quiwon is Kwiwon. So you can follow me there as well. I'll always post whenever I have a blog post. And yeah, I would say those are the two best ways to get in contact with me, to find anything that I'm writing, or any other content that I'm creating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, tap into the blog, tap into him on LinkedIn, connect with him. I'm sure he would love to get in contact with y'all. But as we wrap up, man, first off, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for coming in and letting us know what you got going on in your world. But I do want to wrap and end with this, y'all. And it's very much so in line with what Chad did at the end of this episode. Um, if you, wherever you're at in your process, wherever you're at in your journey, it's okay to ask for help. Straight up. It is okay to ask for help, whether it's on a math problem, whether it's a simple question that you have on your job, or just maybe you are going through it. That is okay. But just know it is okay to ask for help. And so as we go into this new year, y'all, we're excited to set new goals, new priorities with you. And we're excited for y'all to continue to tap in with us. But as we always say on this show, it is the powerful growth mindset, and it always starts with you.